Said I'm free. Praise the Lord, I'm free. No longer bound. There's no more chains holding me, and my soul is resting. And it's such a blessing to praise the Lord. Hallelujah, I'm free. Freedom, it sounds good and it sounds nice. Thank you all for watching the Facebook Live presentation of Private William Riley Webb. My name is Kevin Johnson. I'm an employee of the Connecticut State Library History and Genealogy Unit. And what you have just witnessed is the 637th time that I presented the story of Mr. Private Webb. How I got started talking about Private Webb. Came back in the late 90s. Our agency was asked to do something to honor the black soldiers for the Bushnell Foundation. And our museum director, Mr. Dean Nelson, comes over to me one day at work. He says, "Hey, Kev, how would you like to become Denzel Washington?" So you know what I said? I said, yeah. And so I became Denzel Washington, but he wanted me to put on a uniform like Denzel did in the movie Glory, which was the 54th Regiment. You know, their great battle and that great regiment up in Massachusetts. And so I said, yeah, so I agreed. We marched down to Bushnell Park in Hartford, Connecticut, and we took about 75 photographs. I'm standing there doing all types of poses and just having a great time. And then this young man from Yukon comes over and he says, "Sir, who are you?" Looking at me quite strangely and says, "You look like one of the Buffalo Soldiers." Told him, "No, sir, not one of the Buffalo Soldiers," which was those black soldiers that actually stayed in the war after the Civil War. Went out west, down Texas, made a great name for themselves. But then he's looking at me real close. He says, "Man, you really do look like Denzel." I said, "No, I'm not Denzel." And so we had a great time. But then he started asking me, "Well, who are you?" Started talking about the 29th Connecticut Volunteers. Connecticut enlisted 2 black regiments, was the 29th and the 30th. The 30th did not raise enough soldiers, but those guys that they put together, they placed immediately with the United States Colored Troop, the 31st Regiment. They went right into action. So our guys were being recruited and trained and ready to go to battle. So this young man says, "Well, Kev, you sound like you know a great deal about the 29th. How about coming over to the university and just sharing the story?" And so I'm thinking about it, and I'm saying, wow, it's a great opportunity to present African-American history during the Civil War. As I'm sharing it, Dean is behind me saying, "Kevin, don't do it, don't do it." He looks at me, he says, "Why?" I tell him why. He says, "Because once you take one Civil War presentation, you will never, ever stop telling the story." As I said to you before, that date was February 10th of 1998. Here it is now, almost 23 years later, 637 presentation. I think Dean was right. I think Dean was on to something. He said, once you start telling it, you'll never stop. So here I am today sharing the story for our 3rd Thursday, which is now the 4th Thursday at the Connecticut State Library. What a great place. I've been employed here now over 30 years. And telling the story of Private William Webb has been a huge part of my journey at the State Library. Looking into all of the records and sharing the story of Private Webb has just been a great journey. Would have never imagined where this would have taken me when I accepted that first date on February 10th of 1998. I've gone through schools and universities and churches, historical societies, all around the state talking about Private William Webb. And then I actually had the opportunity to stand on a great stage out in Tanglewood, where I was in a program that Salute to America, and there's 1,000 people in the audience. Would have never imagined standing there sharing this story about the 29th Connecticut Volunteers, a great regiment. Private Webb was one of those soldiers in that particular regiment, served in Company F, was a real person. And how did we come up with Private Webb? Well, we wanted to do a person from Hartford. I say we because as an agency, as an H&G unit, we pulled together and everybody took a piece and a part and we began to put the story together, and then I had to come up and write the story. And so that old song that you heard me sing is one of those old African-American spirituals that my grandparents made us learn. I thought it was a great piece of the story to add about freedom. Freedom was coming through the abolition of slavery, but also coming if an African died, that he was on his way to heaven. So that was freedom. So I thought that song would be so fitting for the story. But as a group, as my colleagues and I began to look for different information, I got some material here that's there, and then we'll take a few questions as we share. So first piece of information, wanted to know who Private Webb was. Went to the muster roll and looking at all of the different soldiers, and I found Private Webb and wanted to do some research, so I began to use some of our collections, the vital records. I found his mom and her marriage to Mr. Salisbury, then found Private Webb's enlistment papers. So giving you some of those who love documents. And so as a state library, we have all these great documents, and this is Private Webb's enlistment paper with his signature also that's there. And so we wanted to, oh, okay. So we wanted to share those. So they're telling me, slow it down, slow it down. So let me go back over that again. And I'll go in slow motion. And so looking at those information there and just sharing, digging into the records to find a little bit more about Private Webb. I wanted to know who he was. And so not knowing anything about him, we began to put the biographical sketch. As many of you know, here at the State Library, we help people find their family history. That is one of the jewels of what the State Library offers, this great place with all these great documents. And so we are able to help people find their family history. And so doing that basic genealogical search, was able to find Private Webb, his enlistment papers, then also at the end of the war when he passed, had his probate state papers. And then also began to read a few good books about Private Webb, but about the regiment as a whole. And then went to the two books that we have actually in our agency, is the Sketch of the 29th. Great book that talks about the regimental history, and then also the Out of the Briar story, which is one of those books by one of the gentlemen, Alexander Newton, who actually served in the 29th, went on to become a minister, shares a great piece of information about his regimental and the Civil War battles. And so those are just some of the artifacts that we have, some of the documents. And when you begin to do family genealogy or just your own history, you want to use those primary documents. It gives you that full account of the stories behind the person. And so we here at the State Library have all those great records, from court documents to vital records to probate, the land, all kind of great stuff. So if you've never gone to the State Library, let me do a quick PR moment. The Connecticut State Library, located 231 Capitol Avenue, Hartford, Connecticut, right across the street from your state capitol. So if you ever get a chance, come down when we do open. We know we're in this time, in this climate, so when we do open, please definitely get a chance to visit with us. But now, I'll open the floor for just a few questions. I know we have a couple as our team that is surrounded here. Want them to be able to send me those questions. Yes?
So Jenny wanted to know what it was like to perform without an audience, and what were some of your most memorable audiences?
Wow. The question that comes to the floor is, what was it like when you saw the recording? We did that actually just with some video cameras and no audience. So I had to go into that theatrical mode of pretending. That was a little hard to picture an audience where there is none. And so without having the feedback, there are many moments and things where as a presenter, you try to pull the audience in. So whenever I do a live presentation, I definitely incorporate the kids into the story to engage them even more into the story. So without having an audience was a little bit challenging, but I had some good camera people that gave me some great eye contact. And so that eye contact was helping me to really stay focused and sharing the story of Private Webb. And so those are some of those things that you just have to kind of get into the zone and not being an actor, just play on that Connecticut State Library, but really loving drama. Wanted always to share the human side of these African Americans, wanted to share the feelings of what these gentlemen were going through in this quest for freedom and participating in the war. So those emotions I really try to bring out so people will not just only just see an African American, but will feel the heart of a soldier going through the battles. And so that second question was?
Laura Smith wanted to know if you've received any professional acting training.
No professional acting training, but love history. My dad, before he passed away, one of his passions was history. He said, Kevin, if you study anything, study history. And so I've always had a feel for history, always a love for history. Even when my grandmother was alive, just talking to her, who lived late into her 90s. And so just talking with her about my own personal family history, fell in love with history. And so I love just sharing those stories, and those are just some things, but no professional acting whatsoever. Everything you see when I present is just really my passion for telling history. As one of my good friends, Coach Obey, would say, Kev, you remind me of the jelly, the African jelly, person who's a storyteller. And so I really treasure that when he put that stamp upon me as the jelly to tell the story. Really did something for me. And so I try to do that and share the story right from the heart.
Okay.
We have another question that's coming in. Yes?
What is your favorite memory in presenting the story of Private Webb?
My favorite memory of presenting the story. Now I got to think back, because this is 637 times. Let me think. At a school. I was at a school out in, I believe, South Windsor. Shout out to Pleasant Valley. Give them a shout out. I was at a school presenting there, and it was a moment that really took me by surprise. I'm doing that closing piece of the battle at the crater, and during that moment, took off my hat, and after the tears cried, and paused for that moment, and all of the students paused with me, and they were dressed in Civil War gear, and they all pulled off their hat. That was just a touching moment. That was one of those memorable moments. Then there was another when a student asked me, or an adult audience actually, and I started to cry, and the person was saying, "You made me cry." So there are some moments when I'm presenting and telling the story that my own emotion gets caught up into the story. When you think about losing lives, and you think about those battles and the horrific battles that these men were in, and seeing bodies all around, so it really moves me. And so I never know if I'm going to cry or what. And so in those moments, I definitely share. Those are memorable moments. Those are moments that just make me go, wow, and that really gives me a joy in really sharing the story. Yes?
So Ernie asks, he said, I'm sorry, I missed the start. Is that a corps badge on your hat, and which corps?
This is the 29th insignia. The light blue represents our infantry. Means we were the foot guys. We were those guys that were walking and journeying through the battles. And so as you look at the uniform that I am wearing, it is a replica. As you look, it is one that is, I'll share this with you, is one that is very hot. As you can see, it is all wool. It is even the wool blended shirt. The uniform came in 2 sizes. It either fit or it didn't. And so what the soldier would actually do is actually swap to find one that was more suited for themselves. And so it is definitely an uncomfortable uniform, but a uniform that they wore all year round. And so mine is getting very worn and torn. And so that is something that I really need a new uniform over these 20-something years. But yep, that is our insignia. So whenever you see Civil War guys, you'll see the different colors on their hats and on their uniforms to define either infantry, cavalry, artillery unit as well.
So Jenny asked, do you actually have a recipe for the hardtack?
I do have a recipe for the hardtack. One of the schools that I would visit down in Niantic, they would actually do a Civil War day, and they would make hardtack pieces. I do have it. I'll give you what I can remember. It's made of flour, water, and a pinch of salt. You cook it in the oven on about 375 degrees. Then you take it out, set it outside for about 2 days, and then bring it back in. Let it start to get hard into gel. And those are some of the recipes. But if you miss that again, just email me and I'll give it to you. But yeah, so we do have a couple of recipes. I know our museum director, Dean did give me a couple of recipes for it, as well as the school in Niantic. Yes.
Can you explain some of the gear that you're wearing?
The uniform, as you heard me say, thanks, that's a great question. Uniform, you know, it comes in the two sizes, it either fit or it didn't. The haversack, as you can see, I need to speak with my quartermaster for a new haversack. It is one that has been very worn and beat up. Soldier would keep all of the food items in there. You would find the hardtack, salt pork, all those goodies that they would have inside of their haversack. I always share with the school kids the hardtack. Always reminds me of one of those, what do you call them, the premium saltines. That you would have a premium saltine that you leave it for a few years. Tell one of the school kids many times that, what if you were in the 12th grade or kindergarten and you got a premium saltine and you held it to 8th grade? What do you think happened to it? Over the years, they would say, well, it turned moldy and maggots started coming out. Well, what do you think a soldier would do? Take that hardtack out of his bag with all what you just described there. Brush that bad boy off, dip it in a hot cup of coffee, and he would have him some hardtack. So the haversack is a soldier's personal bag. Canteen, as you can see, used for drinking water, but some of the officers would have some of those special drinks inside the canteen, which we won't go into details. The cartridge box. Soldiers issued at least 20 to 40 pounds of lead that they would go into battle with. And then the percussion box, where they would have the tool to fire the Civil War weapon. I do not carry the Civil War musket with me as I go into reenactment mode with the schools, with all of the protocols that are there, but we do have a couple, one in our museum from Company B, the Springfield musket that our soldiers did carry into battle. So we do have one that was on display. So at some point when we do open, you get a chance to actually see that particular item. I'm bending down here, show you my knapsack. Inside the knapsack, a soldier would have 2 wool blankets, a rubber gum blanket, which he would lay at the bottom of the tent, dress parade coat. They would also have a number of items, letters, books, items that they would carry inside of their knapsack. We have another question?
No.
Oh,
Unless you can get people to ask you some more questions.
we got one here.
Oh, do you portray any other historical figures?
Any other characters? I do. I also portray the story of Mr. Jordan Freeman. Jordan Freeman, who was killed at the Battle of Fort Griswold in the American Revolution. I like Jordan Freeman's character. For me, it is one that is more suited now as I'm getting a little bit older now. And so Jordan Freeman's character is one that really launches into African-American journey during the Revolution or colonial period. And I really like that story because it shares a piece that we normally don't talk a great deal about, and this journey of freedom. So I do go around to schools and share the story of Jordan Freeman at the Battle of Fort Griswold. So I do like that. I am working on the third character. Won't give you all the details yet, but I'm looking forward to this third character, who is an older gentleman from Hartford, has a great story. And one of the things that I love to share with his story is, I think even more so now, is one of the stories that will allow me to share with our seniors. Think about our seniors many times. If you don't ask the right questions, then you miss all the great information. But if you hit it right on the target, and they'll just share so much great information. And when we think about our seniors, many times we may not have a clue of what they've gone through. But as young people, if any are there, talk to your grandparents. And get to the heart of the story about the family history, about trying times, what it was like growing up. Carol Gans, that used to work with us here, put together a nice cheat sheet of questions to ask a family. I wish I would have pulled it out, I would have showed it on the screen, but I have a nice cheat sheet of things that you can ask your family about your family. And so that story that I'm working on now, my third character, will give you an opportunity to really give back to our seniors, to really tell their story, which becomes to me, you know, an open book. Many times we look at a person, we'll see them face to face, we see their complexion or gender, but have absolutely no idea of who the person is. But when you start talking, then you begin to realize that, wow, what a great story. So my third character, hopefully I'll get it developed. I've read all the information. I just need now to put it into story form. He is about 80, close to 90 years old, so you will see the transformation from what you see now to an older gentleman. So really looking forward to that. Had another question on the floor. Thank you all for staying tuned in. I really appreciate it.
Question. What kinds of items did soldiers discard along the way?
You would find the knapsack would be discarded along the way because of the heat and the humidity being down in Virginia. So soldiers would definitely lose some of the equipment just for comfort and trying to just stay cool. They would be charged for it going back when they would have their muster roll in. They would need to give an account for equipment, so those things were definitely items that you needed to replace. So you would find all kinds of stuff that's there on the side of the road. Great question. Got another question coming through.
Maxine would like to know if Webb is related to the Webbs of Wethersfield.
Great question, but no, not to my knowledge. Private Webb comes back from the war. And he's injured with the eye injury. He comes, he's discharged. We find him actually on Spring Street, which is around the corner now from the Science Museum. So he's in that area. Find a couple of other soldiers that are also in that house. And as we began to do more of the research, no, he's not related to the Webbs from Wethersfield, but his family history does extend into Boston, Massachusetts area, where one of his sister actually marries a family in that area. Haven't continued to do the research on that piece, but once I start presenting, we can dig a little bit deeper. But my supervisor, Mel Smith, began to do a little bit of the research. So we will do a full balance of the story once I stop presenting the story of Private Webb. Great question, great question.
So I think we're getting ready to wrap up. Is there anything you want to add that you want people to know about William Webb, about your storytelling, about the State Library?
The thing that I would share with any of our young people or those who have fallen in love with history, really dive into it. Pull out those stories, make the connection, the human connection. We live now in a time to where, as an African American, still the struggle continues. Still the journey of freedom is knocking at the door, getting closer and closer to just achieving what these gentlemen were fighting for, that thing called freedom. And so when you look at the history of your own family, make the connections to the periods. Be able to say, wow, my great-grandfather served in the Civil War. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was in the Revolutionary War. So our families have great connections. That's where the story lies. I mean, many times I think we share the story of the big names. And we talk about the big names, but it is those small families, those individuals that we really don't share their stories, which is your family. And so we want to be able to tell those stories. Here at the State Library, our state archivist is always looking for great information to help families, churches. Pull out those volumes that's in your high attic. Pull those volumes, bring them, call the state archivist. See what we can do to help you save and protect your family history. So I would say to definitely treasure it. Those students that are thinking about getting into storytelling, let it come from the heart. It's our passion that you really want to share. It's the passion of the story, because these are real people, just not someone that's in a book. It is a person, and we want that individual to definitely come alive. And so I get excited every time I present, because it's a new audience. People would ask me time and time again, do you get tired of sharing the story? I never really get tired of sharing the story, because the audiences are always new. There's always someone in the audience that haven't seen me share the story. So I targeted on that person and then really try to pull them in to the 29th story. Then there's those who have seen me present a number of times, but I always pull out something new that they'll say, oh, I thought I knew he was going. And so, but history is one that we really want to share. The State Library is a great place for you to dive into the records and really find out Connecticut's history. We have a rich history that's here. We have great World War I records. We have great archive stuff. The unit that I work in, History and Genealogy, has a great, awesome staff that loves helping people find their connection to the past. As my former unit head would say, everybody wants to make their connection to the past. And so we want to be able to do that. So if you get a chance, please visit us when we do open. You can email. Definitely, when this time does clear and I haven't stopped presenting the story, I am available to come and share the story of Private Webb with your group. And so I want to just thank you for watching. Thank you for
Join us next month.
being a participant. I hope you enjoyed the presentation of Private Webb. Every third Thursday next month, February, we'll have another presentation.
The Concerned Parents of Color of West Hartford.
The Concerned Parents of Color of West Hartford will be doing the presentation. So please follow us on Facebook. I always want to say that. Follow us on Facebook. Follow our website. And please stay tuned. But thank you for allowing this moment to be able to share with you the Connecticut State Library and also the story of the 29th Connecticut Volunteers. One of those soldiers, Private William Webb. It's been a joy, and I see all the little hearts and things going up. Thumbs up to you, so thank you for that.